Alright, the UFC's heading to Paris this weekend for a fight night. Now, overall, I'd give this fight night an 8 out of 10. You know, pretty strong. You know, we got some good prospects on here. We got some old vets on here. You know, there's also quite a lot of new people come to the UFC as well. You know, like Harry Hardwick, Axel Sola. We got some good fights on here. So I'm going to break down all the fights and let's get into this. The first fight on the card, Shauna Bannon versus Sam Hughes. Now, Shauna Bannon, 2-1 in her last 3. You know, coming off a submission win to Puja Toma and got that decision loss to Bruno Brazil. Not the greatest look, but you know, it is what it is. On the other hand, we got Sam Hughes. You know, she's only ever lost and won by decision. And, you know, coming off that Stephanie Luciano decision win, lost to like Piera Rodriguez by decision. You know, neither of these people have the best resumes, let's be honest. Their resumes aren't very good at all. But if I had to pick out of these two, Shauna Bannon is the safest option here. I think her footwork's better, her striking's better, her volume of striking's better. I think she's, overall, either taking the two of them, I think Shauna Bannon has better striking, the volume. You know, Sam Hughes tends to try and outwork opponents, but if she can't outwork you, she tends to just not win, to be honest. And I do think Shauna Bannon has the volume, striking, the footwork, the striking to get this done. So, you know, it's not the most interesting fight, but it's a fight still, you know. Neither of their resumes are that stacked, you know. I do think Shauna Bannon will press forwards with the striking, the volume. I do think Hughes is, you know, she's quite tough, and she just tries to, you know, outwork the opponents, but I don't see that happening here. So I am picking Shauna Bannon by a unanimous decision, probably 29-28. You know, I can see Sam Hughes winning one of the rounds, probably by just, you know, I don't even know how, to be honest. But I can see it 29-28. Not much else to say here. You know, Shauna Bannon, better volume, better striker. And that's just how I see her winning. The next fight, Andreas Gustafsson versus Renat. I can't say that last name. Alright. Andreas Gustafsson is coming off a unanimous decision win against Chaos Williams. That was a pretty good fight, you know. He showed good stamina, good pace. He marauded him. He's a marauder. On the other side, we got Renat, you know, coming off a Carlos Leal decision win, a Nicholas Dalby split decision win. You know, got a draw with Dos Santos, beat Kevin Lee, beat Brian Battle. You know, pretty decent wins here. But Renat comes out strong. He comes out strong. He's a good striker in the first round. You know, he's got a good approach, but he does fade badly. And that's where I see Gustafsson picking it up and getting this fight done. I think Renat will come out stronger. He'll win the first round. He'll do more damage. He'll put the pressure on Gustafsson. In round 2, round 3, I see Gustafsson picking up his pace, picking up the pressure. And I just see him marauding him, really. I see him getting in the clinch, roughing him up in the clinch, maybe getting a couple of takedowns. And I see Andreas Gustafsson winning this by a TKO in round 3 in the clinch. I think he'll land good shots in the clinch. I think he'll hurt him between 2 and 3. I just see him kind of marauding his way to a win here by stoppage. I think he's a good marauder. I think he's got good pace, good stamina. You know, he's only ever fought once in the UFC, but it's a decent win, you know. Showed good pace in that fight, and I just don't see Renat beating him, you know. I don't think Renat is, I don't think he has it in him to beat someone like Gustafsson. I think we'll get a late finish here in round 3. The next fight on the card, Brad Tavares versus Robert Brycecheck. Alright, Brad Tavares, he's 2-3 in his last 5. You know, beat Gerald Meerschaert by decision, beat Chris Weidman by decision, has, you know, split decision loss to Park, TKO, finished by Rodriguez, finished by Bruno Silva. And on the other side, you know, we got Robert Brycecheck, you know, lost to Ihor Potieria. Now, that is not a good look. That is a big red flag. And coming into this fight, I'm looking at that loss and I'm thinking, you can't win this fight. You know, I think Brad Tavares, he's not elite, but he does beat these unproven mid-level fighters. You know, losing to Potieria, that's a big red flag, you know. And I think Tavares, he'll keep it simple. I think he'll use the jab, the leg kicks, the cage control. I think he'll have a more patient approach here. And I think he'll just win the rounds on the feet. Nothing flashy from either of them, really. But I do think the reliable pick is Tavares. You know, that loss for Robert is a bad loss. So, even though, yeah, I just think Tavares is a more reliable pick here, getting it done. I think he's better all around, and it tends to beat these mid to low level fighters. So I am picking Brad Tavares via decision, 29-28 unanimous, and I see him winning 2 rounds. I can see Robert Brycek winning one of them. But overall, I feel like he just beats these mid-level to unproven fighters, And I think that's exactly what Robert Brycek is. And I think Brad Tavares will get this done. On the feet. On the feet, yeah. I think he'll win on the feet. Anyway, the next fight on the card. Sam Patterson versus Trey Waters. Now, Sam Patterson, he's 3-1 in his last 4. Has that finish over Danny Barlow. Beat Kiefer Crosby by sub. Subbed Johan Lanese. Got finished by Yanal Ashmouse. But, yeah. And then we haven't got Trey Waters. He beat Billy Ray Goff by unanimous decision. And Josh Quinlan by unanimous decision as well. Now, I don't rate Trey Waters' wins too highly. At all. And I don't think the wins are that good at all, really, yeah. And I think Sam Patterson, he's tall, he's rangy, he's got good submissions on the ground. I see in this fight, he'll close the distance on Trey. And he'll close the distance, he'll take him down, he'll get him on the floor. And I think he just gets a submission here. I don't rate Trey Waters too highly. He looks decent, but I do think that Patterson can mix it up well. He's decent on the ground, decent on the feet. Do great on the ground, decent on the feet. I just think, he was close the distance, drag Trey Waters into deep waters on the ground, and I think he'll get the round 2 submission. That's how I think it's going to end. So I think he'll just, he'll drag him into deep waters on the ground. I think he'll just close the distance. So I don't see really a way that Trey Waters can win this. He hasn't really impressed me in any way. His best wins aren't exactly the greatest wins. And Sam Patterson should be able to get this done by round 2 sub. The next fight, Harry Hardwick versus Carl Fernandez. I think that's how you say his name. Harry Hardwick, never fought in the UFC. Pretty sure he's from Cage Warriors. Taking this fight on short notice, like a couple days, like a week's notice, I think. Fernandez, he looked phenomenal in his last fight against Guram Kutaladze. Looked great. Got that decision win. Got that finish over Yaya. Lost to Mark Daisky, but that Guram win is phenomenal. It's a great win. I think it's a big step up for Harry Hardwick, to be honest. I don't think he's going to be able to do much here. Fernandez, he's at the upper echelon of the lightweight division, and Harry Hardwick coming from Cage Warriors on less than a week's notice. I don't think it's going to be able to hang with these dangerous guys in this upper echelon of the division. I expect to see Fernandez kind of chew up his legs in the first and second, and I think he'll overwhelm him with his combinations and it's good strikes, really. I don't see Harry Hardwick doing well in this, to be honest. Coming off that short notice from Cage Warriors, I see Fernandez winning this by round 2 TKO KO. Now, I think, as I said, he'll chop up the legs of Harry Hardwick. I think he'll land better combinations. He'll hurt him. He'll drop him in round 1. And I think he'll get the finish in round 2. I think he'll drop him multiple times in round 1, actually. And then get the finish in round 2. I don't think Hardwick's on the same level as someone like Fernandez. At the top of the division. Fernandez is quick. He's got good speed, good precision. He's got some good instincts. And his win against Garam is amazing. I just think he overwhelms him and gets his finish in round 2 here by stoppage. Stoppage in round 2. Anyway, the next fight in the card. Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija. Now, Delija, I don't know where he's coming from, actually. But, first fight in the UFC, and they keep on doing this at heavyweight. They keep on giving these unknown heavyweights into the top 10 straight away. And it doesn't really work out. We saw it happen with Curtis Blades and... who did he fight? I can't remember his name. But, it was a close fight, to be fair, but Curtis Blades won. And I think it's the same thing here, but I think it's a bit different as well. Marcin Tybura is coming off the McParkin win, the Deniz Doctor stoppage, lost to Sergey Spivak by sub to Ivaza, lost to Aspinall, which isn't a bad look because Aspinall's the current champ, great heavyweight. Delijah, untested in UFC, and from what I've seen, he has decent power, but he's lacking. He has the power, but he lacks technique. He lacks the. He lacks what it has. I think he's untested as well, and I do think Marcin Tybura, he has good pressure, underrated cardio. He's good in the clinch, good in the ground control, and I can see him taking this fight to the ground pretty much every round, and is getting some big ground and pound. And yeah, he's good from the top position. Tybura is, and I just think Delijah is just untested. I don't think he has a very big tool bag, to be honest. He's very limited in what he can do. So I am picking Tybura by round 3 TKO ground and pound. I think he'll take him down round after round. I think he'll pummel him on the ground. And I think he'll just get this one done. I wouldn't say easily, but I think he'll get this one done without much effort. As I said, what's his name? Delijah isn't well tested. Never tested in UFC. He's quite limited, has good power. I don't really see him catching Tybura, and I see Tybura winning this by a stoppage on the ground in round 3. The next fight on the card, Umar Sy versus Brenson Ribeiro. Umar Sy, coming off a loss to Alonzo Menifield, has that good win over Woon Jung, decision. Beat Tuco Tokos by submission. On the other side, we've got Brenson Ribeiro, coming off that Azamat Murzakanov finish, loss. He finished Dayar Nugozai, I wish I say his name. He also beat Kaio by decision. Machado. He lost to Magomed Gadziev, by decision. Lost to Zhang Mi Yang, he just fought Walker, by first round finish. Now, I think Umar Sy, I think he will not engage in a war here. This will not be a war. This will be a measured and I think tactical fight from Sy. I think he'll pick him apart at range. I think he'll slow the pace, work in the clinch. And I think Sy, he's just going to work the clinch time to get the cards. The control time. Ribeiro, he's dangerous in round 1, but he's wild, inconsistent. And I see Umar Sy just managing the pace here, getting the control time just to rack up the points in the card. And I can see this ending in a Umar Sy 30-27 decision. There's going to be nothing spectacular about this fight. There's going to be, there's nothing great about this fight. It's just, Umar Sy will keep it safe, rack up the control time, and I think he's winning the cards. We're not going to see some incredible performance. Well, not incredible performance, but we're not going to see some highlight here. Sy is going to keep it steady. He's going to control the pace, control the time, and just win the cards. So I've got Umar Sy by a 30-27 decision. Next fight on the card, William Gomez versus Robert Ruchala. Now Gomez, he's 4-1 in his last 5, coming off a loss to Haider Emil. Beat Jonderson Brito, split decision. Got Yanis Gamori, finished him. Beat Francis Marshall by split decision. Beat Jarno Aarons by the unanimous decision. And Roberto, this is his UFC debut, coming from KSW. I think he's a champ over there as well. He is. You can see it on the picture. Now, Gomez is he's the king of close decisions, really. He's slow paced, which kind of leaves a lot of rounds up in the air. You're thinking, did he win that round? He's very, very slow paced. He has good anti-grappling, though. He has pretty good kicks, actually, I have to admit. But, Ruchala coming off on this is his first ever UFC fight. He's quite unproven, And I think it's tough to pick someone who's a newcomer like this, I think he does, it is a question is he ready for the UFC? Is he not? It's quite hard to pick these fights, especially when it's the first fight for the person. But I do expect Gomez to just have a slow pace, but also work Ruchala a bit more. Then I think he needs to work him a bit more, have that slower pace, we'll kind of keep it close though. And I can see William Gomez winning this by a split decision. As I said, I think the pace will be slow, but he will outland him. I think he'll do more, but because of the slow pace, I do think it'll be a split decision, and it'll probably be a split decision win. I just think that Ruchala is untested. He's first fight in UFC. I have to see how he goes. there's a chance he wins, but if I had my money, I'd go Gomez on this by split decision because that's what he does the best. The next fight on the card, Patricio Pitbull versus Lozeni Keita. I'm pretty sure. Right, Pitbull 2-1 in his last, 1-2 in his last two, coming off a win to Dan Ige, lost to Yair Rodriguez. That Yair loss, he did not do well in that fight. Yair just dominated him really for the 3 rounds. Was it 3 rounds? Yeah, it was 3 rounds because it's 3-14. And Paddy Chana was co-main. But he just got dominated really. Didn't show much. Like he just didn't do well in that fight. Yair just beat him everywhere, and but it was kind of like a show. It's kind of an old Pitbull now, so I think that record's wrong as well. That record is wrong on Pitbull. The Dan Ige win. It's a win. He didn't look the greatest in that fight. It's a fair win for Pitbull. I think he dropped Ige at one point, but couldn't finish him. But those are two old guys. Like Ige is like the gatekeeper of the featherweight division. Doesn't really win up the rankings. Pitbull beat him pretty fair, but was also like still a pretty competitive fight. And we've got Keita, pretty sure he's an Octagon champion, coming over to the UFC for his debut. Now I don't like picking debutants, but Pitbull is old. He loses pace quickly. And Keita, he's younger, has better boxing, probably quicker now. I kind of see Pitbull doing well in this first round with the grappling and landing some heavy shots. But I think Keita, after the first round, he'll pick up the pace. I think he'll have the better boxing, good combinations. I think his volume, his pressure, his striking, everything will be better than Pitbull's. I don't really see why Pitbull wins this. I think this is honestly like a layup for Keita to get in the UFC. And I think Pitbull's he's too old, I think. He's too old, too slow for someone like Keita. So I am picking Lozeni Keita by a round 2 KO. I think he'll land a good combination on Pitbull in round 2 and just drop him out cold, to be honest. Pitbull, I think, will lose gas after round 1. He'll just lose pace, lose gas. He'll diminish. And I think round 2, Keita will pick up the pace, and I think he'll get that round 2 KO. The next fight in the card, Rhys McKee versus Axel Sola. Now, Rhys McKee, he's 4-1 in his last 5. No, 1-4. But his losses aren't bad losses. Lost to Chidi, lost to Ange Lusa, lost to Alex Morono, lost to Hamzat Chimaev, the current middleweight champion. Does have a win over Daniel Frunze by doctor stoppage. They've got Axel Sola coming over from, I think, AFC, I'm not 100% sure on that. He's never lost before. He has a draw against, I believe he drew against Imavov's brother, actually. I'm pretty sure that's who his draw was against. Nasruddin Imavov's brother, the main event. Now, it's a tougher fight to call, in my opinion. McKee hasn't had the best run in the UFC, but as I said, his losses aren't bad losses. Like, all the guys who he's lost to are good fighters. And the only problem, he's quite hittable, and he does struggle to impose his will in the cage. And he got Sola, he's got sharp technique, he's got good speed, and I can see him capitalizing on how hittable McKee is. McKee's losses aren't bad, but I do think Sola being undefeated, a champion in AFC, I think he's got the cleanest striking, I think he's quicker. And I see him getting this one done, to be honest. I see him doing this by a decision, probably 29-28 if I had to put my money on it. I don't see what was I going to say? I'm saying my tongue, sorry. I just had to explain this. I think Rhys McKee has a good chance in this, but I do think Sola will get it done. He's a bit sharper, less hittable. Unlike McKee, who's quite hittable. I think he'll hit McKee quite hard, quite a lot. And I think he'll edge this one based on damage on the scorecards. I see it's a 29-28 decision. McKee's losses aren't bad, but I think Sola gets this one done. Undefeated, only ever drawn, and that's the Imavov's brother. You got to rate that pretty highly. So yeah, I think it's this one, 29-28 decision for Axel Sola. The next fight, Balaji Oki versus Mason Jones. Oki, 2-1 in his last 3, lost to Chris Duncan by submission, beat Michael Aswell, beat Timmy Kumba by split decision. Mason Jones, coming off that Jeremy Stevens win. lost to Ludovic Klein, beat David Onama, got no contest against Alan Patrick, and beat Mike Davies. No, lost to Mike Davies, sorry. Yeah, Oki's good. Oki comes out strong in round 1. But, yeah, Oki comes out strong in round 1. But he does fade as the fight goes on. And, you know, Mason Jones, he has good combinations, volume striking, and he has good grappling, opportunistic grappling. Oki will start fast, but I do see him fading in 2 and 3, and I see Mason Jones picking it up, and I see him using that volume striking to kind of like just outwork Oki in the 2nd and 3rd. I don't see a way Oki can win that in the 2nd and 3rd. I think he'll just take over with the pace and the pressure, and I feel a decision for Mason Jones is most likely, and also a 29-28 of that. I think Oki will come out strong in round 1, put the pace, the pressure, land some big shots, but I think he'll fade after that. And Jones is grappling and volume striking. I think that'll come out. You'll really see it. And I think he'll win the last 2 rounds to get a 29-28 decision. The next fight on the card. Modestas Bukauskas versus Paul Craig. Now, this isn't... Modestas, he's 4-1 in his last 5. Beat Kutalaba, beat Rafael, beat Marcin Petrino, beat Zach Porger. Lost to Vitor Petrino by finish. Paul Craig's coming off a no contest to... Is that right? I don't think that's right. Let me quickly search this up. Hold on, give me a second. Paul Craig. No, yeah, that's wrong. Rodolfo Bellato. Yeah, he's coming off a no contest to him. That's wrong. Sorry about that. He's coming off a no contest up kick. That's a pretty bad one as well. I watched that. Then he's got the loss to Bo Nickel, which is aged horribly. We saw what RDR did to Bo Nickel, and RDR, to be fair, he's top 5 now, I think. But Bo Nickel is terrible on the feet, and I mean terrible. He's got no body. RDR just destroyed him with knees in the clinch and the body shots. And Paul Craig lost purely because of the stand-up to Bo Nickel. And that is a terrible look. But moving on from that. He lost by finish to Caio Baralho. He's got subbed by Brendan Allen. Got beat Andre Muniz by KO TKO. And I find it hard to find any universe to pick Paul Craig here. He's got that win over Ankalaev by a triangle in the last 3 seconds. Bit fluky. I think he beat Jamal Hill as well. But, Modestas, he's got better wins. He's a better fighter overall. And I don't see Paul Craig pulling off a submission here. Maybe if he gets dropped, he could, get a triangle, maybe. But, to be honest, I don't see that happening. I think Modestas is just a better striker. He's quicker. Paul Craig is slow now. He's quicker. Modestas is quicker, better striker, better combinations. Paul Craig, quite hittable. He's slow. I think he's going to get outworked, and I think Modestas will get a round 1 KO. I think Paul Craig doesn't have it in him anymore. I think he'll get flatlined in this fight and get cut, to be honest. It's sad to say because I do like Paul Craig, but I don't think he's UFC caliber anymore, to be honest. And I do see Modestas getting this done by round 1 KO. The co-main event. Benoit Saint Denis versus Mauricio Rufy. Now Benoit, he's 3-2 in his last 5. Has that Moicano doctor stoppage loss. Dustin Poirier, got finished. KO TKO. Did sub Kyle Prepolek in his last fight. I think that was in the 2nd round, if I'm not mistaken. And beat Matt Frivola by finished. Finished Thiago Moises. Benoit Saint Denis, after the Poirier lost, you can tell he slowed down quite a lot. I don't know if it was a change in style or a change in game plan, but he's looked different since that fight. We go to Rufy now. He's got that spinning wheel kick highlight KO against Bobby Green. One of the best KOs this year. Got that decision win over James Lontop. Beat Jamie Markley by KO. Or TKO. I can't remember which one actually. Rufy's just far more explosive, a far better striker than Benoit. I don't see a way that Saint Denis could win this, to be honest. Saint Denis, he hasn't looked good in his last fights, to be honest. Last 3. Even though he beat Prepelec, he didn't look the best in that fight. And Marufi, part of the fighting nerds, you can't really pick against him. He's got better head movement. He's explosive. Got good kicks, good strikes. He's even got decent grappling. He's got that scissor takedown at one point. I just don't see why Saint Denis wins this, to be honest. He doesn't have good head movement. He's not a great striker anymore. He lacks the pressure as well. Well, I guess he has the pressure. Sorry, doesn't have much head movement. And he's quite slow as well. I see this fight being like a McGregor Aldo. I think Rufi will slip and throw a check hook and just knock out Saint Denis. I'm picking Rufi by a first round KO. So I think he's quicker, more explosive, and a better fighter than Saint Denis. And I see him slipping, throwing a check hook, and Saint Denis goes out cold. I don't think Saint Denis is too slow, doesn't have the head movement. And I think that's Rufi's this is quite a good layup for him as well. It's another thing. I do think Saint Denis is one of the worst ranked fighters right now. We got people like D-Rod in the ranks, but Saint Denis, he has not looked good at all. Moicano has got a pretty bad loss to Benil Dariush. Moicano doesn't look very good either anymore, and he lost to Moicano. So, I don't think Saint Denis will be in the rankings after this, and I don't think he'll maybe ever be back in the rankings. But anyway, yeah. So I got Rufi by round 1 KO here, slip check hook. And yeah, the main event, Nasruddin Imavov versus Caio Borralho. Imavov 16-4, 4-1 in his last 5. Only loss being to Chris Curtis, and that was a no contest as well. Got that great finish over Izzy earlier on this year. Beat Brendan Allen by decision. Finished Cannonier. Got that majority decision over Delidze. He's looked good in his last fights. I have to admit, looked very good. Ever since he lost to Strickland, he's really picked up. He's just really picked up, really, and he's done pretty well. And he got Borralho on the other side. Last fight he beat Jared Cannonier by decision. Finished Paul Craig. Beat Abbas Magomedov. Beat Michael Oleschek. Beat Makomed Muradov by decision. Subbed Michael as well, actually. This is a very 50-50 fight. Imavov, he has the better counter striking, the better underrated takedown defense, underrated anti-grappling. He's a good good in the clinch as well, good knees. Borralho, I think got better boxing fundamentally. He's got the good grappling. He's very sharp on the feet. But I do see Borralho becoming more predictable as the fight goes on and he slows down. I think Borralho might win the first 2, and then start slowing down. The pace will get less and less, and I see him become more predictable. And I see Imavov capitalizing on this heavily. I think he'll use his good counter striking to counter Borralho, land some big shots, and I think he's got good kicks as well. And I think his anti-grappling is good enough. He'll stuff the takedowns. He'll do well in the clinch, good knees. It's a 50-50 fight. But if it was on a weighing scale, I would go more towards Imavov. So it's really like 55-45. I just think the counter striking, as Borralho slows down, Imavov will pick up. The counters, the kicks, the clinch work, the anti-grappling. I think Borralho will have early moments. I think he'll have some good shots, good takedowns in the earlier rounds, around 1-2. But I do think the counters, the movement and variety from Imavov will kind of edge out this fight for him overall. So I am picking Imavov by decision, 48-47, maybe even split decision. It's a very close fight. I just think the counters of Imavov, the variety, the movement, the anti-grappling, I think he has what it takes to beat Borralho, but it is still a very close fight. But if I had to weigh one side, Imavov is the side I am weighing. I know a lot of people are picking Borralho. Whether it is, it's a great number 1 contenders fight. Whoever wins gets a title shot in the middleweight division. Do I think they beat Chimaev? That's another video's talk. But anyway, that is my UFC Paris predictions. Thank you for watching, and I will see you at UFC Noche.